My name is Daniela, and at 36, I've built a life I'm proud of as the owner of a successful art gallery in Boston. Everything I have today came from my own determination, after learning at age 11 that sometimes the people who should love you the most can walk away without looking back. So when my doorbell rang on that rainy Sunday evening last month, nothing could have prepared me for seeing my mother's face after 25 years of silence. She asked for my help as casually as if she'd just seen me yesterday. And when I hesitated, the anger in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Before I tell you how my long-lost mother suddenly appeared at my doorstep after a quarter century, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to make a difficult choice about family. My childhood until age 11 had been relatively normal in our suburban Massachusetts home. My father, James, was a hardworking construction supervisor who always made time for me despite his demanding schedule. He would come home tired, but never too exhausted to ask about my day or help with homework. He had calloused hands that somehow remained gentle when braiding my hair for school each morning. My mother, Margaret, was another story. In my earliest memories, she seemed present enough, making dinner, attending parent-teacher conferences, taking family photos during holidays. But there was always something distant in her eyes, as if she was looking past us, toward something else, something better. The first clear sign came when I was around 8. My father planned a weekend trip to the beach, and my mother spent the entire time on a separate blanket reading magazines and sighing heavily whenever Dad suggested she join us in the water. I remember building a sandcastle alone, while watching other mothers play with their children, feeling the first pangs of something missing. By the time I was 10, the arguments had become routine. Late-night voices trying to stay quiet, but failing words like trapped and suffocating, slipping through my bedroom wall. My father's voice always pleading my mother's growing colder with each passing month. My 11th birthday was the last one we celebrated as a family, though even that was fractured. My mother arrived 2 hours late to my small party, missed the candles on my cake, and gave me a generic art set still in the store bag price tag attached. My father tried to compensate with extra enthusiasm, but I could feel something breaking beyond repair. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, I came downstairs for breakfast to find my father sitting alone at the kitchen table, eyes red-rimmed. The house felt different, emptier somehow. "Where's Mom?" I asked, already sensing the answer in my stomach before my brain could catch up. "Daniela, sweetheart?" My father began, his voice cracking. "Your mother needed to. She decided she needs time away from us." "When is she coming back?" I asked, my voice small. The pause before he answered told me everything. "I don't know, honey." She had left sometime in the night while I slept. No goodbye, no note for me, nothing except a brief message to my father that she couldn't do this anymore. She took her clothes, her jewelry, and the framed photo of herself from college before she had me, before her life took a turn. She apparently never wanted. I waited for a phone call, a letter, a birthday card, anything to show I still existed in her world. But the silence stretched from days to weeks to months. The first year was the hardest. I'd rush home from school hoping to find her in the kitchen, having changed her mind. Every Mother's Day at school was an exercise in pain crafting cards and gifts that would never reach their intended recipient. To cope, I retreated into art-filling sketchbooks with drawings of the mother I remembered, and sometimes the mother I wished she had been. I'd have imaginary conversations with her, asking questions that burned inside me. Was it something I did? Was I not enough? Why didn't you love me enough to stay? My father threw himself into being both parents. He learned to French braid my hair after watching tutorial videos, scheduled dentist appointments, attended every school function, and worked overtime to ensure I never felt financially insecure. He never spoke ill of my mother, even when I screamed that I hated her during my worst moments of teenage grief. "Your mother made her choice, Daniela," he would say gently. "But that choice reflects nothing about your worth. Some people aren't built for family life, and that's their loss." We created our own traditions to fill the void. Sunday morning pancakes shaped like animals, summer road trips to national parks, and holiday movie marathons with homemade popcorn. But nothing could completely erase the empty chair at the dinner table, or the absence of a mother's guidance as I navigated puberty and high school social dynamics alone. By 14, I had stopped waiting for her return. By 16, I had stopped mentioning her name. The abandonment shaped me in ways I wouldn't fully understand until adulthood, a persistent fear that anyone who loved me might disappear, a compulsive need to be self-sufficient, and walls around my heart that few would ever breach. High school became my proving ground for self-sufficiency. While other girls shared secrets with their mothers about boys and clothes and dreams, I buried myself in academics and art, determined that my mother's absence would never define my success. Ms. Harrison, my art teacher, noticed my talent and my isolation. She stayed after school to teach me advanced techniques, introduced me to famous female artists who had overcome adversity, and became the first adult woman since my mother's departure, who seemed genuinely invested in my future. "You paint like someone with something to say, Daniela," she told me after viewing my portfolio. "Your use of negative space speaks volumes about presence and absence." I hadn't realized how much my art revealed about my inner landscape, but her observation opened something in me. Under her guidance, I developed a distinctive style that caught the attention of college recruiters. By senior year, I had secured a substantial scholarship to study fine arts at a prestigious university in Boston. When I shared the news with my father, his eyes welled with tears. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. You've earned every bit of this." His pride was tinged with concern, though his heart had begun giving him trouble, occasional pains that he downplayed, but couldn't completely hide from me. College presented new challenges. My roommate Sophia was outgoing and socially confident with parents who called daily and sent care packages weekly. Initially, I retreated from her friendly overtures, protective of my carefully constructed independence. But Sophia was gently persistent. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said one night after I deflected another question about my family. "But everyone needs at least one person they can talk to." Slowly, I began to open up. The first time I told the complete story of my mother's abandonment, we sat on our dorm room floor until 3 in the morning, sharing a pint of ice cream and tears. Sophia didn't offer empty platitudes or pity, just understanding and friendship. Dating proved more complicated. My first serious relationship with Thomas, a philosophy major with kind eyes, initially felt promising. But as we grew closer, my fear of abandonment surfaced in destructive ways. I'd analyze his texts for signs of waning interest, create distance before he could, and question his motives for simple acts of kindness. "I'm not your mother, Daniela," he finally said during our breakup conversation. "Not everyone leaves, but some lessons are hard to unlearn without professional help," which I wasn't yet ready to seek. I double majored in art history and business practical choices that reflected my determination never to be financially vulnerable. While classmates complained about workload, I thrived on the busy schedule that kept painful thoughts at bay. I secured an internship at the Hamilton Gallery in Boston's Art District, impressing the owner with my combination of artistic knowledge and business acumen. During my junior year, my father suffered a heart attack. I rushed home terrified of losing my only parent, the one person who had never abandoned me. The role reversal was immediate. Suddenly, I was managing his medications, coordinating with doctors, and handling household tasks during his recovery. "You don't have to put your life on hold for me," he insisted from his hospital bed. "Your future is in Boston, not here taking care of your old man." "You never left me, Dad," I reminded him. "I'm not leaving you." But as he recovered, he insisted I return to school. "The best thing you can do for me is live the life you're meant for. That's all I've ever wanted for you." I returned to Boston with renewed purpose, working evenings at a cafe after my gallery internship to save extra money for my father's medical expenses. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, but each exhausted night brought me closer to self-reliance. After graduation, I accepted an assistant position at the gallery where I'd interned. The salary barely covered rent for a tiny studio apartment in an unfashionable neighborhood, but it was a foothold in the art world I was determined to climb. On my first day as a full-time employee, I called my father. "I made it, Dad. I'm officially a working professional in the art world." His proud laugh carried through the phone line. I never doubted you for a minute, sweetheart. The next 5 years saw my steady rise in Boston's competitive art scene. I advanced from gallery assistant to coordinator to junior curator, earning a reputation for spotting emerging talent and creating compelling exhibition narratives. My supervisor, Judith, noted my particular skill for connecting with artists whose work dealt with themes of absence and transformation. You understand the stories behind their work, she observed. That's something that can't be taught. I was building professional momentum when my father's health took its final decline. The second heart attack was massive, and by the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. At 29, I became truly alone in the world. The grief was all-consuming. I had lost not just my father, but my anchor, the one person who had witnessed my entire life journey. During the small funeral service, I kept expecting my mother to appear. Surely she would come for this. But of course she remained as absent as she had been for the past 18 years. My father had left me the modest family home, and his savings nothing extravagant, but enough to provide a foundation of security. After settling his affairs, I returned to Boston with a new perspective on life's fragility and the importance of creating meaningful work. The idea for my own gallery began as a whisper during sleepless nights of grief. Why continue building someone else's dream when I could create something that honored my father's unconditional support and channeled my understanding of art as healing? I finally sought therapy to process both my fresh grief and long-buried abandonment issues. Dr. Lewis helped me recognize patterns in my relationships and work habits that stemmed directly from my mother's departure. You've spent your life proving your worth, she noted during one session. What would it feel like to believe you're worthy without constant proof? The question rattled me and became a cornerstone of my healing journey. As I worked through my pain, the vision for Phoenix Gallery, named for the mythical bird rising from ashes, took clearer shape. Securing funding proved challenging. Despite my solid business plan and industry experience, loan officers seemed skeptical of a young woman without family backing or wealthy connections. After the fifth rejection, I almost abandoned the dream until a chance meeting changed everything. Andrea Cohen, a former client from my curator days and successful businesswoman, expressed interest in my concept over coffee. The art world needs more galleries focused on transformation narratives, she said after reviewing my proposal. I'd like to be your business partner. With Andrea's investment and my savings from my father's estate, Phoenix Gallery became reality. We found a space in an up-and-coming neighborhood, renovated it ourselves to save money, and opened our doors with an exhibition featuring artists who had transformed personal trauma into visual expression. The opening night was modest but promising. A local arts reporter covered the event, noting the gallery's unique focus on art as testimony to human resilience. The article brought curious visitors, and gradually we built a clientele that appreciated our mission. Those early years required relentless work. I lived frugally in a small apartment, reinvesting profits into the gallery and slowly expanding our artist roster. Andrea's business connections proved invaluable, and our partnership deepened into friendship as we navigated the challenges of entrepreneurship. My personal life also began to heal. I created a home that felt safe, a sun-filled apartment with walls showcasing art from emerging artists, comfortable furniture that invited relaxation, and plants that required daily care, teaching me that nurturing brings growth. I established new holiday traditions with my chosen family of friends, hosting Thanksgiving dinners, where everyone shared something they had overcome that year. I began volunteering at a community arts program for at-risk youth, finding purpose in mentoring children navigating their own difficult circumstances. Romance remained complicated until I met David, an architect who approached relationships with patient intentionality. On our third date, when I briefly mentioned my mother's abandonment, his response was simply, "That must have shaped so much of how you see the world. I'd like to understand that part of you better whenever you're ready to share it." His genuine interest without pressure slowly dismantled my defenses. After 6 months of dating, I took him to my childhood home, which I had kept but rarely visited. Walking through those rooms with him, I shared stories of my father's love and my mother's absence without the shame that had previously accompanied those memories. As Phoenix Gallery established its reputation, and my relationship with David deepened, thoughts of my mother surfaced less frequently. Occasionally, I would see a woman of a certain age with similar coloring and feel a jolt of recognition. But these moments became rarer. One such sighting 3 years earlier had particularly shaken me, a woman at a downtown cafe who could have been my mother's doppelganger. I had almost approached her before she turned, revealing a face that was similar but definitely not Margaret's. The incident had reopened old wounds temporarily, making me realize that some part of me still harbored the childish hope of reconciliation. But mostly, I had accepted her absence as a closed chapter. I had built a successful business, cultivated loving relationships, and created a life my father would have been proud to witness. If asked, I would have said I had made peace with my motherless existence. Until that rainy Sunday evening changed everything. The day before my mother reappeared began ordinarily enough. Phoenix Gallery had hosted a successful opening for a promising sculptor, whose work explored family dynamics through abstracted household objects. The evening had gone exceptionally well, with several pieces sold in interest from a prominent collector. David and I celebrated afterward with Andrea and a few close friends at my favorite Italian restaurant. We toasted the gallery's growing success and shared plates of pasta as I allowed myself a rare moment of uncomplicated happiness. To Daniela, Andrea had raised her glass, whose eye for transformative art continues to make Phoenix a space like no other in Boston. Sunday morning dawned gray and drizzly. David had left for a weekend architectural conference in Chicago, so I enjoyed a quiet morning alone, coffee and the newspaper yoga, and a long call with Sophia, who now lived in Seattle, with her husband and 2 children. By afternoon, the drizzle had become steady rain. I worked on gallery paperwork, prepared a light dinner, and settled in for a quiet evening with a novel I'd been meaning to read for months. The sound of raindrops against the windows created a cozy atmosphere that made me grateful for the security of my home. The doorbell rang at 7:38 p.m. I checked my phone confused since I wasn't expecting a delivery or visitors. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a raincoat, her face partially obscured by an umbrella. Assuming she might be a neighbor or someone seeking shelter from the storm, I opened the door. 25 years dissolved in an instant. Despite the passage of time, the lines now etched around her eyes, the gray threaded through her once auburn hair. I recognized her immediately. My mother. She looked simultaneously like a stranger, and the face that had haunted my dreams throughout childhood. She was thinner than I remembered, her cheekbones more prominent, but her eyes were unmistakable, the same deep green I saw in my mirror every morning. Daniela. She said my name, sounding foreign in her mouth after so many years of silence. You've grown up beautiful. The casual nature of her greeting, as if we'd seen each other last month instead of last century, struck me like a physical blow. My throat constricted, and for several seconds I couldn't speak. The world narrowed to the doorway between us, rain pattering on her umbrella, creating a soundtrack to this surreal moment. Margaret? I finally managed, deliberately using her name rather than Mom, a title she had forfeited decades ago. What are you doing here? Her smile faltered slightly. May I come in? It's pouring out here. Against every instinct, screaming for self-protection, I stepped aside. She entered my home, bringing with her the scent of rain and something floral, a perfume I didn't recognize. She removed her wet coat, revealing a worn but once expensive blouse and slacks that hung slightly loose on her frame. We moved to my living room, where an uncomfortable silence settled between us. She glanced around, taking in the artwork on my walls, the books on my shelves, all the evidence of a life she knew nothing about. You have a lovely place, she finally said, running her fingers along the back of my sofa. Very artistic. I own an art gallery, I replied, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Oh, that's wonderful. You always did like to draw as a child. The casual reference to my childhood, a childhood she had abandoned, sent anger surging through me. How dare she speak of that time as if she had been present for it? Why are you here, Margaret? I asked again, refusing to soften my tone. She sighed, glancing at a painting on my wall. Ironically, a piece about maternal absence by one of my favorite artists. It's been so long. I thought maybe it was time to reconnect. After 25 years of complete silence, no birthday cards, no phone calls, nothing. It was a complicated situation, Daniela. I had difficulties. Difficulties? The word felt insulting in its inadequacy. What kind of difficulties justify abandoning your 11-year-old daughter without so much as a goodbye? She flinched, but quickly composed herself. I'm not here to rehash the past. I'm here because... She paused, seemingly weighing her words. I need a place to stay for a while, and some financial help to get back on my feet. The audacity stunned me into momentary silence. She continued, filling the void with what sounded like a practiced speech. I've had some setbacks recently, lost my apartment in Chicago, and there are some people I owe money to. Nothing serious, just a rough patch. I figured since you're doing well for yourself, she gestured around my comfortable living room. Family helps family, right? Family. I repeated the word bitter on my tongue. We haven't been family since you walked out that door 25 years ago. Her expression hardened, revealing an edge I remembered from childhood arguments with my father. I'm still your mother, Daniela. Biology doesn't make you a mother, I replied, years of therapy giving strength to my voice. Presence does, care does, love does. So that's it. Her voice took on an injured tone. You won't help me at all. I don't even know you, I said truthfully. You're a stranger who shares my DNA. Why would I invite a stranger to live in my home or give them my money? Something shifted in her eyes, then the wounded mother act dropping away to reveal a calculating coldness. I see your father turned you against me. Dad never spoke ill of you, I countered. He gave you more grace than you deserved, and he raised me alone while working himself to exhaustion. James always was good at playing the martyr, she muttered. He died 5 years ago, I said flatly. Heart attack. A brief flash of genuine surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by practiced sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you... I challenged. You left him too. Margaret straightened her posture, changing tactics. Listen, I understand you're upset, but everyone deserves a second chance. I'm your mother. That means something. It meant something to me for years, I admitted. I waited for you. Checked the mail every day. Kept my window open at night in case you came back after I was asleep. Eventually, I realized you weren't coming back because you didn't want to. That's not fair, she protested. You don't know what I was going through. You're right. I don't. Because you never told me. You just left. Rain pounded against the windows as we stared at each other across the gulf of 25 years. Part of me, the wounded child who never stopped wanting her mother, ached to bridge that gap. But the adult I had become recognized the hollow manipulation in her approach. I can't help you, I finally said. I think you should leave. Her face transformed anger, replacing the veneer of maternal affection. You ungrateful little... She caught herself forcing a tight smile. You clearly need time to process this. I'll come back tomorrow when you've had time to think. She gathered her coat and moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. I'm staying at the Westside Motel Room 12. When you change your mind, you can find me there. The presumptuous when, rather than if, reignited my anger. I won't change my mind. We'll see, she said with unsettling confidence. Blood is thicker than water, Daniela. You'll remember that. As the door closed behind her, my knees finally gave way, and I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by the collision of past and present. I barely slept that night, replaying the encounter and questioning my response while rain continued to lash against my windows, like an echo of my turbulent emotions. True to her word, Margaret returned the next afternoon. This time I was prepared, having called David to return early from his conference and join me for moral support. His steady presence beside me on the sofa provided an anchor, as the doorbell rang precisely at 2 o'clock. You don't have to do this alone, he reminded me, squeezing my hand before I went to answer the door. Margaret stood there with a paper shopping bag and a more carefully composed appearance than the previous evening. Hairstyled makeup applied with precision, wearing a new-looking blouse that must have strained her supposedly limited finances. "I thought we could look at these together," she said, bypassing a greeting and holding up the bag as she entered uninvited. In my living room with David, now introduced simply as my partner, she emptied the bag onto my coffee table. Photographs spilled out faded snapshots from my childhood before she left images I recognized, and some I didn't. "Remember this day at the beach?" she asked, holding up a photo of 4-year-old me building a sandcastle while she sat nearby under an umbrella. "You were always so creative." The manipulation was transparent. These photos were meant to establish continuity, to suggest a loving relationship that had merely been paused rather than abandoned. I remained silent as she continued her narration of selected memories, noticing how she skipped over the later years when tensions grew visible even in photographs. David watched carefully, his architect's eye for detail, likely catching what I already knew: that in many of these photos, Margaret was physically present but emotionally distant, rarely making direct contact with me even in supposedly happy family moments. "I kept all these," she said, as if preserving photographs was equivalent to preserving a relationship. "I've always carried them with me." "Why?" I asked, breaking my silence. "If you cared enough to keep photos, why didn't you care enough to call even once?" "I tried," she claimed, eyes widening in practiced innocence. "Many times. But your father must have intercepted my calls. And when you were older, I couldn't find you. You had moved, changed your name." "I never changed my name," I corrected her immediately. "And Dad would never have kept you from contacting me. He told me repeatedly that you had your reasons, and I shouldn't judge you." Margaret's narrative began to unravel as I questioned specific claims. When had she allegedly called? What number had she used? Why hadn't she sent letters which couldn't be intercepted? With each inconsistency exposed, her friendly demeanor deteriorated. "I need $15,000, she finally stated, abandoning pretense. "I have people after me for gambling debts. Dangerous people. As my daughter, you should help me." "Gambling debts," I repeated, pieces falling into place. "How long have you had a gambling problem?" "It's not a problem," she snapped. "Just a run of bad luck. Everyone hits rough patches." David spoke up for the first time. "Mrs. Harrison." "It's Mills now," she corrected sharply. "I remarried." This new information struck me like another betrayal. "You remarried when?" "About 15 years ago. It didn't work out." "So you could commit to a new husband but not check on your daughter." The hurt in my voice was raw, despite my attempts at control. "That was different," she dismissed with a wave. "Anyway, Roger turned out to be as much of a disappointment as your father. I've had to rely on myself, which hasn't been easy." Something in her phrasing caught my attention. "How many times have you been married since you left us?" Her hesitation told me everything. "3 times, she finally admitted. "But that's not important right now." "And how many of these husbands did you leave when they didn't meet your expectations?" I pressed. "You don't understand what it's like to be trapped with someone who—" "Actually," David interrupted gently, "I think Daniela understands abandonment quite well." Margaret's expression hardened as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. "I need that money, Daniela. Family helps family. You keep saying that I observed, but you haven't acted like family for 25 years. Her facade cracked completely then. "Fine. You want the truth? I need the money and you have it. You owe me for giving birth to you, for the years I spent changing diapers and making meals when I could have been living my own life." The naked resentment in her voice confirmed what I had always suspected, but tried to deny that she had seen me as a burden rather than a beloved child. The pain was acute, but also oddly freeing. This wasn't about reconnection. It was about extraction. "I think you should leave," I said, rising from the sofa. "I won't be giving you any money." "You can't just throw me out," she protested. "I'm in real danger. These people don't mess around." "There are social services that can help you," I replied. "I can give you their information." "I don't need a handout from the government. I need my daughter to do her duty." Your duty as a mother was to raise me, but you abandoned that, I countered. Why should I have a duty to you now? Margaret grabbed her photos, stuffing them back into the bag. Your neighbors have been very helpful, she said with sudden calculation. The lovely couple next door. They were shocked to hear I was sleeping in a motel while my successful daughter lives in this beautiful apartment. The threat was clear. She would damage my reputation if I didn't comply. My neighbors know me, I replied with more confidence than I felt. They know my character. People love a family drama, she continued. I wonder what your fancy gallery clients would think if they knew you turned away your poor mother in her time of need. David stood, his usual gentle demeanor hardening. I think it's time for you to go, Mrs. Mills. Daniela has made her decision. Margaret looked between us, seemingly assessing whether further manipulation would work. Finding no opening, she gathered her belongings and moved toward the door. This isn't over, she promised. Remember, I promise. I'll be at the gallery tomorrow. Maybe you'll be more reasonable in a professional setting. After she left, I collapsed into David's arms, trembling with the aftershocks of confrontation. She's going to show up at Phoenix, I whispered. She'll make a scene. Then we'll be prepared, he assured me. Call Andrea, call security. You have people who support you. Later that evening, I received a call from Walter Jenkins, my father's longtime friend and former colleague. Daniela, I hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue, but I saw Margaret in town today. She mentioned she'd reconnected with you. The conversation that followed revealed more painful truths. According to Walter, my mother had abandoned relationships throughout her life, not just with me and my father. She had left her parents' home at 18 after a minor disagreement, cutting contact for years. She had walked away from friendships when they required emotional investment or reciprocity. Most damning was his revelation that my father had hired a private investigator years after she left, concerned that something might have happened to her. The investigator had found her living in Miami, with a wealthy boyfriend working in a boutique and apparently unconcerned about the family she had left behind. Your father never told you because he didn't want to destroy any hope you had, Walter explained. He thought someday she might mature enough to reach out properly. This final piece confirmed what the logical part of me already knew. My mother's absence had been a choice renewed daily for 25 years. She could have found me at any time if she had wanted to. The next morning, Margaret made good on her threat. She arrived at Phoenix Gallery during a busy period when several regular clients were browsing a new exhibition. Andrea recognized her immediately from my description and tried to intercept her, but Margaret pushed past, calling my name loudly. Daniela, there's my successful daughter who lets her mother sleep in a roach-infested motel. The gallery fell silent as all eyes turned toward this unexpected drama. I emerged from my office mortified, but determined to handle the situation with dignity. Margaret, this is not the place, I said quietly, trying to guide her toward a private area. Oh, now you're embarrassed by me, she demanded loudly. Everyone should know what kind of person you really are. She has this fancy gallery, drives a nice car, but won't spare a dime for her own mother who sacrificed everything for her. Andrea had already discreetly called our security service, and 2 uniformed officers appeared at the gallery entrance. Margaret noticed them and escalated further, grabbing a small sculpture from a nearby pedestal. Is this art worth more to you than your mother's safety? She demanded, holding the piece as if she might drop it. One of our longtime clients, Dr. Winters, stepped forward unexpectedly. Excuse me, but I've known Daniela for years. She's one of the most ethical, compassionate people I've encountered. Whatever your grievances, this is not the way to resolve them. Margaret turned her anger toward him. You don't know anything about our family. I know that adult children aren't responsible for solving their parents' self-created problems, he replied calmly. And I know that genuine love doesn't use public humiliation as leverage. His intervention bought enough time for security to approach. Seeing her leverage evaporating, Margaret set down the sculpture and pointed a finger at me. This isn't over. Blood is blood. You'll see. As security escorted her out, she shouted final accusations about my ingratitude and callousness. When the gallery door closed behind her, the quiet that followed was deafening. I stood frozen, humiliation and decades of unprocessed grief washing over me. Andrea quickly ushered the remaining clients to another room, while David, who had arrived moments earlier, led me to my office. There, away from public eyes, I finally broke down sobbing with the accumulated pain of abandonment renewed and compounded. The following day, with Andrea's encouragement and David's support, I reluctantly filed for a restraining order. The legal action felt extreme. She was my mother after all, but her escalating behavior left no alternative. The court granted a temporary order based on the gallery incident and Margaret's implied threats. 3 days after the gallery confrontation, when no further contact had occurred, a package arrived at my apartment. Inside was a collection of my childhood drawings artwork I had created between ages 5 and 11, carefully preserved, despite everything Margaret had claimed about clean breaks and moving on. The package included no note, no explanation for why she had kept these mementos while discarding the actual relationship. Their presence raised uncomfortable questions about the complexity of her feelings. Perhaps she had cared in her way, just not enough to overcome her own demons and desires. This final communication left me with more questions than answers, more grief than resolution. But it also marked the end of Margaret's reappearance in my life. She checked out of the West Side Motel the next day, destination unknown. The weeks following my mother's intrusion were among the most emotionally turbulent of my adult life. Despite the rational understanding that I had made the right choice in maintaining boundaries, waves of doubt and guilt crashed through my carefully constructed defenses. Maybe I should have at least given her something, I confessed to Dr. Lewis during an emergency therapy session. What if she really is in danger? Daniela, she replied gently, giving money to someone with a gambling addiction isn't help, it's enabling. And from what you've described, your mother's primary interest was extraction, not reconnection. I increased my therapy sessions from monthly to weekly, recognizing that Margaret's reappearance had reopened wounds I had believed were scarred over. The nightmares returned childhood dreams of searching empty houses for my mother, calling her name, down empty hallways, finding only empty rooms with open windows. David proved an unwavering support, neither minimizing my turmoil, nor suggesting I should have acted differently. Your feelings are valid, he reminded me often. All of them, the anger, the guilt, the grief. You don't have to resolve them neatly or quickly. While I processed my renewed trauma, Andrea stepped up to handle day-to-day gallery operations. Her friendship during this period transcended our business partnership, revealing a depth of care I hadn't fully appreciated before. Take the time you need, she insisted when I tried to return to work prematurely. The gallery isn't going anywhere. Heal first. Seeking additional perspective, I joined a support group for adult children of parental abandonment. In that circle of strangers united by similar wounds, I found profound validation. These people understood the unique pain of being left by someone biologically programmed to protect you, the particular complexity of grieving a parent who was still alive but absent by choice. I thought I was over it, shared Michael, a software engineer whose father had left when he was 8. I have a great career, a loving wife, amazing kids. Then my father contacted me after 30 years wanting to make amends, and I fell apart. All that abandoned child stuff came rushing back. His experience mirrored mine, offering comfort that my reaction wasn't weakness, but a normal response to an abnormal situation. Through the group and individual therapy, I began processing my feelings through art again. For the first time since college, I returned to creating rather than just curating. In my apartment's spare room, converted to a makeshift studio, I produced a series of abstract works exploring abandonment boundaries and healing. The process was messy, raw, and ultimately liberating. Paint became my language, for expressing what words couldn't capture: the complex tangle of loving someone who had hurt me profoundly, of mourning a relationship that had barely existed, of finding peace, not through forgiveness, but through acceptance. As the paintings accumulated, Andrea suggested a special exhibition. Initially, I resisted feeling too vulnerable to share such personal work, but gradually, the idea took root. Perhaps my journey could help others navigating similar terrain. 3 months after Margaret's appearance, Phoenix Gallery opened Absence/Presence, featuring my work alongside pieces from other artists exploring familial disconnection. For the opening, I gave a brief speech about my experience, without naming names or details. Art gives form to what we can't always articulate, I told the gathered crowd. It allows us to externalize internal wounds, to witness our own pain and healing from a necessary distance. The community response was overwhelming, not just critical acclaim, but deeply personal reactions from visitors who saw their own stories reflected in the work. The exhibition became a space for conversations about family expectations, boundaries, and the courage required to protect oneself from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with parents. During this period, I received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to know Margaret from Chicago. I read about your gallery's new exhibition online and recognized your mother's name from my time in a gambling addiction support group, the writer explained. She has left a trail of damaged relationships across multiple states. Please know your boundaries aren't cruelty, they're necessary self-protection. The letter confirmed what I had already concluded, but provided additional peace of mind. My mother's behavior wasn't about me specifically, but part of a larger pattern. Her abandonment had never been my fault. The emotional intensity of this period manifested physically as well. I experienced insomnia, anxiety attacks, and periods of exhaustion. My body seemed to be processing what my mind had been dealing with for months. David suggested a weekend retreat at a coastal bed and breakfast away from the gallery and the apartment where Margaret had reappeared. The ocean had always provided perspective, and watching the waves, their reliable rhythm of approach and retreat, helped me understand that some patterns are nature, not nurture. Upon returning, I called Sophia for the first time since before Margaret's appearance. Our friendship had endured despite geographical distance, but I had withdrawn during the crisis, unsure how to articulate my experience. I should have called sooner, I began. Something happened that threw me completely off balance. Your mother, she said, immediately surprising me. Andrea emailed me because she was worried about you. I've been waiting for you to reach out when you were ready. Her understanding, without judgment, opened the floodgates, and I shared every detail of the encounter, the aftermath, and my ongoing struggle to process it all. You know, Sophia said thoughtfully after listening, when my son was born, I suddenly understood the magnitude of what your mother threw away. Looking at his tiny face, I couldn't imagine any circumstance that would make me walk away and never look back. It's not just against maternal instinct, it's against basic human connection. Her perspective helped me see that my mother's capacity for attachment was fundamentally broken in ways that had nothing to do with me. Some people lack the emotional equipment for sustained love and responsibility. Understanding this didn't eliminate the pain, but it redirected it from a personal wound to a sad human condition I had been affected by but hadn't caused. That night, I wrote a letter to my mother that I never intended to send. I poured out 25 years of questions, accusations, grief, and finally a kind of release. I didn't offer forgiveness that felt dishonest for wounds still healing, but I acknowledged the complexity of human brokenness, including my own. The next morning, in a private ritual of my own design, I burned the letter in a small metal bowl on my balcony, watching the smoke carry those words skyward. The act wasn't about forgiveness, but about relinquishing the power those unspoken words had held over me. While sorting through my childhood home, which I had kept but rarely visited, I discovered my father's journal. Among his practical notes about household repairs and work schedules were entries about his own struggle after Margaret left, his fear of failing me as a single parent, his exhaustion, his determination to show me that love could be reliable, even when life wasn't. Daniela asked again today when her mother is coming home. He had written when I was 12. Each time she asks, the pain in her eyes cuts deeper than anything I felt. I don't know how to make this better for her, except to be the parent who stays day after day, no matter what. His words brought fresh tears, but also profound gratitude. My father had given me the greatest gift possible in the aftermath of abandonment consistency. His steadfast presence had shown me what love looked like in action, not just in words or fleeting emotions. This discovery strengthened my resolve to honor his legacy by continuing to build a life of integrity and purpose. It also deepened my relationship with David, as I found myself able to share vulnerability without fear that it would drive him away. I want you to know, I told him during a quiet evening at home, that I'm still learning how to believe someone can stay, but I'm trying and it gets easier every day you prove it. His response was to hold me closer. I'm not going anywhere, Daniela. That's a promise I intend to keep showing you, not just telling you. As spring arrived bringing renewal to Boston after a long winter, I began to distinguish between forgiveness and reconciliation, realizing that the former might be possible eventually for my own peace, while the latter might never be appropriate given my mother's unchanged behavior. The distinction freed me from feeling that I had to maintain contact with someone who had repeatedly demonstrated her capacity to harm me. I could acknowledge her humanity, even feel compassion for whatever brokenness drove her behavior, without subjecting myself to its effects. Gradually, the gallery reclaimed its identity beyond the special exhibition. I resumed full duties, bringing a new depth of understanding to my curation work. Artists sensed this evolution, and Phoenix increasingly attracted creators whose work dealt with human resilience and transformation. There's something different about you, one artist observed during a portfolio review. You see the layers in the work, not just the surface pain, but the strength beneath it. She was right. My perspective had shifted not despite the painful reconnection with my mother, but because of it. I had faced my oldest fear, her return, and subsequent reabandonment, and survived it. The experience hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed my capacity to protect myself while remaining open to genuine connection. By the time autumn leaves began to turn, I had reached a state of relative peace. Not the absence of pain, but its integration into a fuller understanding of my life story. The nightmares subsided. The gallery thrived. And most importantly, I had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop in my relationship with David, allowing myself to fully inhabit our shared present without bracing for inevitable abandonment. 6 months after Margaret's dramatic reappearance, an equally dramatic exit from my life, Phoenix Gallery, had become more successful than ever. The emotional authenticity of the Absence Presence exhibition had attracted attention from major art publications, establishing our reputation for showcasing work that transcended aesthetic appeal to engage with profound human experiences. Andrea and I expanded our roster of represented artists and hired 2 additional staff members to manage increased interest. What had begun as my personal healing journey had blossomed into a thriving business with a clear identity in Boston's competitive art scene. More significantly, my personal life had undergone its own transformation. One evening in late October, David suggested a walk through the public garden as the autumn leaves created a canopy of red and gold above us. Near the lake where swan boats glided during summer, he stopped and turned to me. Daniela? He began, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. When I first met you, I saw someone who had built extraordinary strength from extraordinary pain. Watching you face your mother's return with such courage only confirmed what I already knew, that you are the most resilient, authentic person I've ever known. He knelt on one knee, producing a small box from his coat pocket. I want to build a life with you, one where you never have to doubt that you are chosen every day with full awareness and intention. Will you marry me? The ring inside was not a traditional diamond, but a unique design featuring a phoenix crafted in rose gold with small rubies, a tribute to both my gallery and personal journey of rising from ashes. My immediate yes surprised even me, not because I had doubts about David, but because I had always imagined hesitating at this threshold, afraid to fully trust in permanence. Yet in that moment, I realized that while my mother's abandonment had shaped me, it no longer defined my capacity for connection. Planning our wedding brought unexpected emotional complexity. Traditional ceremonies centered around family parents giving blessings, walking down aisles occupying places of honor. Without my father, and with a deliberately absent mother, these traditions required reimagining. What if we create our own ceremony? David suggested when I expressed my concerns. One that honors the family we've chosen, rather than simply the family we were born into. His suggestion liberated our planning. We designed a ceremony that would celebrate chosen connections, friends who had become family mentors, who had guided us communities that had supported us through difficult times. Andrea would stand as my witness. David's brother would be his. Sophia would fly in from Seattle with her family. Walter, my father's old friend, would offer a blessing that acknowledged my father's spirit in the gathering. Ms. Harrison, my high school art teacher who had first nurtured my creative voice, agreed to read a poem. As wedding plans progressed, I received unexpected news through Walter's network of connections. Margaret had apparently moved to Arizona, possibly to escape the gambling debts that had motivated her attempted reconciliation. The knowledge that she was now across the country brought a relief I hadn't anticipated, a geographic distance that matched the emotional distance I had established. Our wedding took place in late spring at a small sculpture garden outside the city. Surrounded by art and nature, we exchanged vows. We had written ourselves promising presents rather than perfection, growth rather than stagnation, truth rather than comfort. I choose you, I told David before our gathered loved ones, not from fear of being alone or need to be completed, but from the fullness of who I am and recognition of who you are. I promise to remember that love is a daily choice, not just a feeling, a lesson hard won, but worth learning. The reception that followed celebrated not just our union, but the interconnected web of relationships that had carried us both to this point. We created a gratitude wall where guests pinned notes acknowledging someone who had helped shape their lives, creating a visual testament to how we are all formed by relationships both fleeting and enduring. 2 months after our wedding, my professional life reached another milestone when Phoenix Gallery was featured in a major art magazine as an essential space for art that engages with human resilience. The article highlighted our commitment to featuring artists whose work transforms personal experience into universal insight. The publicity brought new opportunities, including an invitation to speak at a conference about emotional recovery through creative expression. Standing before an audience of therapists, artists, and survivors of various traumas, I shared how curating and creating art had been integral to my healing process. Art doesn't solve our problems, I explained, but it gives them form and containment. It allows us to externalize what feels too overwhelming to process internally. Following the conference, I was approached by a young woman whose mother had left when she was 9. "Your gallery's website was the first place I felt seen," she admitted. "I'm studying art therapy now because of the exhibition you did about absence." Her words crystallized a new purpose that had been forming since my confrontation with Margaret. With Andrea's enthusiastic support, we developed a community outreach program through Phoenix Gallery, offering art workshops specifically for children and adults dealing with family fracture. "Art saved me as a child," I told Andrea as we finalized the program details. "If we can offer that lifeline to even a few people, we've done something worthwhile." As our first anniversary approached, David and I received life-changing news I was pregnant. The joy came tangled with fear. Parenthood raised specters of my own childhood and questions about genetic predisposition toward abandonment. "What if I have whatever made my mother leave?" I whispered to David one night, hand resting on my still flat stomach. "Daniela," he replied with gentle certainty, "you've spent your entire adult life making conscious choices that prove you're nothing like her. You choose presence. You choose responsibility. You choose love even when it's difficult." His faith in me bolstered my own, and as the pregnancy progressed, I found myself not just accepting, but embracing the opportunity to create a different kind of family story than the one I had inherited. We transformed the spare bedroom into a nursery, filling it with art created by friends in gentle colors that would stimulate rather than overwhelm. Each choice, from the books on small shelves to the handcrafted mobile above the crib, represented our intention to build a home where creativity and security coexisted. Painting became my meditation during pregnancy. I created a series of small works that would hang in the nursery, each representing a different quality I hoped to nurture in our child: courage, compassion, curiosity, resilience. The act of creation became a conversation with the future, a way of processing my hopes and fears about motherhood. "This child will never question if they are loved," I vowed as I painted. They will never wonder if they are enough. As my body changed, carrying this new life, I reflected on how far I had traveled from the abandoned 11-year-old who had believed herself unworthy of her mother's love. The journey had not been linear. The confrontation with Margaret had proven that healing isn't a destination, but an ongoing process. But it had led me to a place of profound self-knowledge and hard-won peace. I had learned that forgiveness isn't always about reconciliation with those who hurt us. Sometimes the most important forgiveness happens within ourselves, releasing the shame of being left the mistaken belief that we could have been enough to make someone stay who was determined to leave. My father's voice seemed to echo through time. Your mother made her choice, Daniela, but that choice reflects nothing about your worth. He had been right all along. My mother's abandonment had never been about my value, but about her capacity. Understanding this truth had finally freed me from the weight of proving myself worthy of love. As I approached motherhood, I carried this understanding like a talisman. The cycle of abandonment would end with me. My child would know consistency, boundaries, and unconditional love not as abstract concepts, but as daily lived experience. The evening before our anniversary, David found me in the nursery adding final touches to a small painting of a bird teaching its young to fly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind, hands resting gently on my growing belly. "Family," I replied honestly. "Not the one I lost, but the one we're building." I've realized something important. Family isn't just about blood or biology. It's about who stays, who chooses to be present through both beauty and brokenness. "That's what we're creating here," he agreed. "A family built on choice and presence." As I set down my paintbrush and leaned into his embrace, I felt our child move within me, a gentle reminder that life continues forward, that new beginnings emerge from endings, and that love, when chosen daily rather than expected, automatically creates the strongest bonds of all. I have learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in maintaining connections that harm us, but in having the courage to release them. My mother's brief reappearance and subsequent exit taught me that protecting yourself from toxicity isn't selfishness, it's self-preservation. And sometimes loving yourself enough to set boundaries is the most profound lesson life offers. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about setting boundaries with family? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. Remember, you deserve relationships that honor your worth. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build through choice and love, not obligation. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find peace in your own journey toward authentic connection.